Greetings and welcome to the Lake Resources N.L. webinar. It is now my pleasure to introduce your host, Steve Prominence. Thank you, Mr. Prominence. You may begin.
Thank you very much. And from wherever you're dialing into, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Pleasure to have you here. Today I'm going to be talking about clean, high purity lithium. And the reason for doing that is because we've all seen the advent of electric vehicles and in our COVID and post-COVID world, the massive growth we're seeing in electric vehicles, particularly in the US, in East Asia, and in Europe. Additional incentives have been going to promote growth, and the key ingredient that goes into the batteries that power these electric vehicles is lithium. Lithium that is of a higher purity, or should I say lower impurities, goes straight into a battery, into the cathode, rather than getting reprocessed. So it's naturally in higher demand. And I'm going to be talking about a new, cleaner, greener way of producing that high purity lithium, and Lake Resources at the forefront of this change. On slide 2, there is a disclaimer. I will be making forward-looking statements, so please read this at your leisure. This presentation is available on our website, which is www.lakeresources.com.au at the end. Thank you. So on slide 3, I try to summarize the key points about what makes Lake different to others. We're at the forefront of using clean technology. But it's not a black box. This is a simple adaptation of a well-known water treatment method. It's something that's been used widely since the 1940s. Perhaps you may have one in your house. They're often on kitchen sinks, maybe a Britex water filter. It's just that this method has been adapted for extracting lithium. And the beauty of it is it's very efficient and very disruptive in this industry. Basically, the salty water, where the lithium is dissolved in it, the process separates that lithium directly from the water without doing anything to it so that it can be returned to the source it comes from. It's cost competitive versus a traditional process, and best of all, produces a very high purity lithium with very low impurities. Now, the demand in this continues to increase. Now, for lithium that's currently produced, it's hard to estimate, but approximately 50 to 60% of that is what we call battery grade or battery quality. This produces it directly. It's responsibly sourced, sustainable, small environmental footprint, low water usage. This isn't mining. This isn't anything particularly nasty. It's just basically water treatment. And because of that, and because this is a new breakthrough technology, it's actually been backed, or should I say our technology partner, LILAC out of California, has been backed by the Bill Gates-led Breakthrough Fund and MIT's The Engine Fund. Now, when there's new, everybody gets concerned. Is this really going to happen? We're on a pathway to commercialization. We've demonstrated this now at lab scale. We've been working for nearly 2 years on it. We've got pilot plant modules that have proven that the scale-up is occurring and that we're getting the same sort of results at a pilot plant as the same as what we got at a lab scale. So we're well underway. So let's have a good look at this technology. On slide 4, I actually try to just break down what are the key differences. Why is this new clean technology something particularly different and compelling? There's no evaporation, which is a traditional method. There's no mining. And it's not a black box, as I said. It's a new adaptation of a well-known technology in water treatment. It's efficient. It's faster. This happens in the space of hours, not months or years. Produces a high-purity product. We're not producing low-quality material. And yet, it's still cost competitive, very easily scalable, can come to market more than a year faster than others, and best of all, environmentally friendly. We essentially return virtually all the water back to its source We just take the less than 1% out of it, which is the lithium. Now, why is that a thing? Well, on slide 5, we talk about the fact that being responsibly sourced has become a thing in the last 6 or 7 months in the industry. Electric vehicle makers and the EU are pushing now for more sustainable battery materials in their batteries. Why? People who buy electric vehicles want to see this, and plus some of the impetus in this post-COVID world is to actually see a greener world with the funds that are being utilized to drive our economies forward. Volkswagen, Daimler, BMW have been at the forefront, and the EU recently produced a very large document specifically looking at more responsibly sourcing of battery materials. Further, as I mentioned before, you've got to follow the money when you're looking at new technologies. And our technology partner out of California, Lilac Solution, is backed by well-known, high-profile investors. We've shown that the process works at lab scale. Just in the last few weeks, we've had the first samples coming out of our pilot plant modules. They were delayed a little because of COVID-19. And in the next few weeks, we'll be getting those converted into a saleable product, lithium carbonate, to show to potential downstream partners. On slide 6, we just look briefly at some of the things that we're intending to achieve, ESG targets for the future. These are things that we're working on together with Sustainability Report so that we can actually deliver to ESG funds and impact investors. On slide 7, we tried to describe in a very simple graphic what this process actually looks like. So at the moment, if you had a lithium brine resource, and most of this production occurs in the north of Chile and north of Argentina, where 40% of lithium is produced, you pump salty water out from underneath a salt lake that looks like Death Valley in California, and it goes into an evaporation pond, an earthenware pond lined with a membrane, and then that water sits there for 9 to 18 months. The water evaporates away thanks to the power of the sun. You concentrate all the salts, and then you try to extract the lithium out of it. What we do here is much more straightforward. We pump the water out from underground, exactly the same, but we put it into a tank or a module. This might stand a few feet high, a few feet wide, and we just have a series of them. Inside each of those tanks are little beads, about half the size of a rice grain. Those beads work like little Pac-Man in the space of 2 hours, and because they're charged particles, they hook on to the lithium ion. And in that 2 hours, they bond up with virtually all of the lithiums there, and then you just release that water back to its source. Only less than 1% of that water is actually the lithium. That's all you want. You don't want to concentrate anything else. You're not interested in other stuff, and that brine is returned without changes. Then in a very short space of time, you produce a highly concentrated solution, which then goes through a traditional lithium carbonate plant. This is what is in most of the brine producers, to then produce a saleable product in the space of about a week for then to export. Most of the batteries are being made in East Asia and more and more now into the EU and to the US. On slide 8, we show the key difference between this method we're using, a cleaner, greener approach, and what happens in the industry at the moment. On the top left-hand side is a photo of the evaporation ponds in the north of Chile, the Atacama. North of Chile and northern Argentina, as I mentioned, produces more than 40% of the lithium that goes into batteries, and that's what it looks like, acres and acres going off to the horizon of evaporation ponds. Now, there's nothing particularly wrong with that. It's a very cost-efficient way. This salty water isn't normally used, but there is concerns about water usage in a hyper-arid environment. On the top right-hand side, you see a traditional hard rock mine. About 50% of the lithium comes from mines like this, mainly in Western Australia. And yet, in comparison to that, you've got the same salt lake at the bottom but a very small footprint, a small physical footprint, plus the water is returned to its source. So a much better solution. That's basically what direct extraction is all about. And we're very grateful to our technology partner, Lilac Solutions, for tweaking this fairly well-known process to make it work here for lithium. On slide 9, I'll now change the focus and talk about Lake Resources project. We're in the heart of the lithium triangle, and this is not just where 40% of the world's production occurs, but it's also at the lowest cost. All of the big 5 producers are here. Albemarle, SQM, and Livent are all listed on the New York Stock Exchange, plus 2 Chinese companies, Tianqi and Ganfeng. And they either own or have significant investments in projects in this area. We're cheek and jowl amongst producers and developers here. The orange circle to the base is our Kachi project, that's our flagship, and the one to the north is immediately adjacent to projects in production and going into production. All of these salt lakes pretty much look the same. There's no trees, there's no grass. It might rain once a year, maybe less. The particular Kachi project we own, we pretty much own the entire basin. Major brine resource, amongst the top 10. And with our recently released Prefeasibility Study, we've shown that of the resource we've defined, even after 25 years, we haven't even consumed 20% of the current resource. It's open at depth, it's open laterally. The lease holdings here are 11 times the size of Manhattan Island. And a key thing is, this isn't about grade, it's about the final product that's produced. On slide 11, I'll go through some of the outcomes of the pre-feasibility study. It was released on the last day of April, and it shows a long life, high value project. We produced high margins because we're producing a high quality, battery quality product from day one, a healthy cash flow and EBITDA, and cost competitive amongst brine producers. And we're actually expecting our operating costs to come down a little as we go through a full-blown definitive feasibility study. And we tweak particularly the supply of energy. We're looking at using a hybrid with solar to both reduce our energy costs and reduce our CO2 footprint. So the beauty of that is that despite this being a new technology, we continue to be cost competitive. On the left-hand side in grey is where the brine producers are. They're all at the low end of the cost curve, and then the hard rock producers on the right-hand side. But one of the things that doesn't really come out in this graph is that it's about operating margin. At the moment, there are some producers that may be only making $1,000 or $1,500, $2,000 a ton. But the beauty of this product being of a high purity is it demands a premium price. So we get a much healthier margin, and we're estimating in the order of 50 to 70% margin, which makes this quite a cash flow solid project. Looking forward to a timeline on slide 13, we show where we've been and what we expect to get out of the coming time. Basically, in the next couple of months, we expect to be producing samples of lithium carbonate, which is a saleable product that can then be sent to battery makers for qualification processing. We're currently producing a liquid called lithium chloride, and we're just in the process now over the next 4 to 5 weeks of converting that into lithium carbonate so that we can then progressively send those off to off-takers in the downstream part of the supply chain. That also then helps us being able to speak to electric vehicle makers and battery makers to say, if you'd like to see a more sustainable product in your supply chain, here's your chance. Then we'll move into our full-blown definitive feasibility study, environmental study, and we aim to have those completed roughly about this time next year. We've already initiated discussions around construction finance. We've had a lot of interest in actually getting this constructed. And then aiming for production in about early 2023 at a significant size, 25,000 tonnes per annum. That's about 7 to 8% of current global demand, and readily scalable if needed, or alternatively, we could start at a slightly smaller scale. So at a corporate level, Lake Resources is primarily listed on the ASX. We're also on the OTCQB under LLKKF. There's just over 670 million shares on issue. That is fairly common on the ASX, those sorts of numbers. If we were a North American listing, that might be a digit less, say 67 million. But the market cap is a fairly humble 18 million US, 26 million Australian. And we think that with the news flow that we have for this year and the interest that is occurring for high purity lithium and the demand for a more sustainable product, that's going to be changing fairly significantly. So to that end, we had a tier 1 analyst. He was ranked number 1 for 7 years straight in Asia in the metals and natural resources space. He actually had a look at this company and at the whole sector and could see that Lake was significantly undervalued. Now, as a CEO, I have to say that, my job, but he demonstrated a significant value proposition here. And that's mainly because with our NPV, our net present value of the Prefeasibility Study, only trading at about 2% of that, but our peers are more around the 10 to 20%. So plenty of opportunity here for a 5 to 9 times uplift. It's compelling, cash generative, a project with significant sustainable competitive advantages because of the fact that this is one of the only near to medium term producers of a more sustainable product. We continue to see supply side constraints. There has been talk now for some time about oversupply in the lithium sector. Gradually, we're seeing that diminish, and we're seeing an interest in new production that is not being financed, so that production squeeze is coming ever and ever closer. Recently, we saw issues with one of the major producers, SQM, in Chile, having issues with its expansions. And all this does is bring ever closer the point at which prices will spike again. All we're trying to do is be ready for construction finance by about the middle of next year, so that this is going to be one of the few projects that will get financed and put into production. Furthermore, just recently we've seen new battery plants being built in the EU and in the US, and very recently the White House actually talking about trying to move production back out of Asia and into Latin America and the US, and this will be beneficial. So in summary, on our last slide, essentially this is a very different offering in the market with a new clean technology, a greener technology for high purity lithium. It's responsibly sourced, it avoids water politics, it's sustainable, and enables a clean future. We're one of the only new suppliers. Our technology provider, Lilac Solutions out of California, is unlisted. So if you want to play this new technology, this is the way to do it. A 21st century solution to batteries for EVs. Thank you so much for your attention. If you need to look at this, again, the website is lakeresources.com.au, and please feel free to email me. We're now going to hand over to questions and answers, and we've got quite a few here. The first one is, how has the growth in the EV market impacted your company? We've seen the electric vehicle market grow significantly. Those who are based in California have certainly seen that. People in the EU, particularly in countries like Norway, Germany, France, the UK, have seen significant growth in the EV market. Thanks to Tesla, we're also seeing the significant growth in the premium end of the market. And as that has developed, there's been a more and more demand for a sustainable product in the supply chain. Now, that can't happen overnight, but as I mentioned, we're one of the only companies that has actually got an offering. The trick or the catalyst to all of this will be getting some of our saleable samples of lithium carbonate into the hands of potential off-takers. Then those companies can actually test them, trial them in batteries, and see that impact. And I think we're going to continue to see this impact lift as things move forward. Next question I've got here is around why direct extraction? What is going on there? So with direct extraction, the beauty is that although there's a number of offerings, we were able to work very early on with LKE.AX, which, as I said, is an adaptation of fairly well-known technology. But what they've done well is that it's a highly selective bead and lasts a long time. Then my next question is about the long-term relationship with LKE.AX solution. As I just mentioned, our relationship with LKE.AX is a partnership. Although they can be a service provider, they are essentially an R&D company, but they're a service provider. Our relationship is really built on us making their technology commercial and be one of the first cabs off the rank to demonstrate that to occur. And on top of that, and because of our long-term relationship, we have a number of areas which are exclusively to be worked together in Argentina. We're fine for LKE.AX to develop similar projects in the continental US, but the heartland, or what I say, the prime location for lithium brines is in northern Argentina and northern Chile. And so that's why we're working with them there. We've also had quite a bit of interest as to what would be the key catalysts to move this company forward. And some of the key pending catalysts are actually getting those samples out into the hands of potential off-takers. A number of investors have been waiting to see the final results of that. Our pilot plant is currently producing lithium chloride. As I mentioned, that's a liquid. We've shown that that liquid is very similar to what we saw at a lab scale. So we reasonably expect to also get high purity lithium carbonate samples, which is a saleable product. But we're going to be proving that over the next 4 or 5 weeks. And that'll be a key catalyst to essentially de-risk this whole new technology and move us forward into the next phase. I've had other questions about whether we've considered a US ADR, American Depository Receipt. We currently have an OTCQB listing, that's LLKKF. In a previous life, I had an experience with ADRs, but the real benefit that we've found from OTCQB is it works a whole lot better than it used to. And as our market cap increases, and as we move forward, we may even have a look at a full-blown US listing on either New York Stock Exchange or NASDAQ at the appropriate time. We're just a little too small for that at the moment. So that brings me to the end of our questions and also the end of the time. Thank you so much for all of your attention. Again, please email me on steve@lakeresources.com.au or visit our website. I'm more than happy to follow up directly with any of you. Thank you for your time. I'm going to hand it back now.
Ladies and gentlemen, this does conclude today's webcast. Thank you for your participation. You may disconnect your lines at this time and have a wonderful day.